You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. This is Citadelium, episode 20, and I'm your host, Yuri Gaia. Today's episode is more about solutions rather than problems, and I wanted to dedicate an episode to some kind of a discussion of a solution rather than problems because all we can see right now is definitely problems. There's lots and lots of negative news out there with everything that's happening around the world. Some people may think that there's absolutely nothing you can do. The future is pretty bleak, and there's absolutely no reason to, resist or hope for anything good out there. But I don't think that's the case. I think there's quite a lot of good in the world. Obviously, the bad, the evil cannot exist with the good. So without the good, right? So they are one and the same thing, just different gradations of it. So I think it's a bit tiring to listen to all this negative news and how big the problem is, how negative everything is. So I want to talk a little bit about the general framework for a positive way of thinking about it and a way of coming up with some solutions to the problems that we have. And I think solutions exist. Solutions out there can be found on the internet by various groups, and I am part of many groups that discuss all kinds of solutions out there. This whole show is actually dedicated to some of these solutions as well. Citadelium comes from the word citadel, and this is what we want to build. This is our ideal, is the world of tens of thousands of citadels, a world full of little kingdoms and principalities and republics and whatnot, in which an individual can choose where he wants to live, according to which standards, to which religion, or with which ethnicity. All those choices would be available to an individual in the world that we imagine. This is an anarcho-capitalist world that essentially provides the freedom of choice to individuals. This world, I guess, is devoid of nation-states, or the nation-states, if they exist, they are much smaller and much fewer than they are right now. But before we reach that world, I think some time will pass. And the problem is that we have to live right now. We are alive right now, and the thing is that the ideal future that we want may not come in the next 5-10 years. It may not come in the next 100 years. It may, and I think it will come, and I actually covered it in one of my previous episodes in which I described the two ways I think the nation-state may or will actually collapse. And I also take note that this whole process may take decades or centuries to unfold. This has to do with many factors, and one of those factors is also about the general development or evolution of mankind, the spiritual evolution, the psychological evolution, just the general development of our species, because you have to be ready for this kind of world in which you have a lot of choice and in which you have a lot of agency, as they call it. Because, to be frank, right now, as we can see, not a lot of people are ready to be free. They're not really willing to use liberty and freedom and use their own capabilities to achieve their goals. They would rather rely on a on some kind of agency or some kind of body that will, make their lives easier and more comfortable. They simply want to delegate responsibility to someone else, and that is completely fine at this point in time. I think it just means that at this point in time where we are, most people are not ready for it. That's why I'm saying that this process of transitioning into the world full of citadels may take a while, not because we don't want it. It's just because there's not so many people who actually want it. There's not so many people who even think about it, right? So, but right now we live in this world, and we have what we have before our eyes. We have these events unfolding, and I'm talking about obviously things like the Great Reset and you know possible mandatory vaccinations and all kinds of things that may not be completely desirable, to speak softly. But there is also a type of a mindset that one can adopt to cope with these things. And cope is probably not the good word here. I think the better word would be to handle and to navigate these waters. These waters, I mean, the world that we live in, this global world that is developing in this globalist fashion. Which is also not a fact. We can see some resistance from various countries, such as Russia, for example, to resistance to this globalist agenda. So we'll see how this will unfold. But nevertheless, things may get a little more sour before they get better, and this sour period may last for quite a while. So I think the good way to deal with this and the good way to see this through is through the philosophy of Stoicism. This is not really a recommendation in terms of which kind of philosophical system to adhere to. I'm just explaining to you what I personally prefer, and I'll lay down briefly why I prefer the Stoic mindset in today's situation. It's because I think it is the most suitable mindset in any situation, not just in bad situations, in good situations as well. But since we live in the world in which apparently, according to mass media and social media, the negative side of the world prevails, I think in this type of world, Stoicism is very, very desirable to have as a mindset. So, if you don't know anything about Stoicism, I'm not going into the academic discussion of the topic here. I would rather just describe it from my point of view, how I understand it, and I think Stoicism is based on two postulates, on 2 points. And the first point is that you have to accept what is. You have to accept the world for what it is and the state of affairs for what they are. And that's it. The second one would be you have to take care of the things that you can control, that are under your control. And you don't have to bother about things that are outside of your control. So let me talk a little bit about both of these in detail. So I think the first postulate is quite self-explanatory. Accept what is, and accepting the things as they are is pretty much what even spiritual leaders such as Eckhart Tolle and others talk when they say that you have to be in the moment, right? You have to live in the moment, you have to live in the now. That is accepting the state of affairs as they are around you. So, if you think about it, when you are angry at someone or you are angry at something, you're mad at something, it's that the reason for that is that you do not accept the state of affairs as they are. For example, if let's have a simple example. You got a present and it's not what you expected, and you got mad. A very trivial example from everyday life. You get mad, your emotions take over you because this is not what you expected. So reality is different from what you had in mind for that particular moment. And obviously, emotions take over you, and you react based on those emotions without actually processing those emotions in your mind and thinking through them and thinking whether it is worth or not worth reacting in that way. So that's what I mean by accepting it. When you accept the reality as it is, you see things that as they are. Let's say you got um, you know an example from some kind of Jersey Shore, maybe when a rich father gives to his daughter a Maserati instead of a Ferrari, right? She gets pissed off, and I guess the proper way to react to such a thing is that, well, it's not what I wanted, but it is what it is right now, and I will accept the reality as it is instead of getting all emotional and fighting with my father about it. I will just, either tell him quietly and simply, maybe if there is a chance we could exchange this thing for something else, or if not, I'll be happy to drive this one because, it's still a luxury car and nobody has such a car, right? That's I don't know. I don't know why this example came to my mind, but that's just what appeared there right now. So this is a very simple concept, I think, but it is everything that is simple is not usually available to everybody, right? So it's not something that a lot of people actually use, and that is precisely why a lot of people uh, are possessed by their emotions, and they lead more of a reactive life rather than proactive. By reactive, I mean that they react to external events. They react to external stressors as they come instead of processing them and then reacting in another manner, probably more benign manner, right? So when you have a stressor that comes from the outside world, and that stressor essentially breaks the picture of reality for you and creates a new reality for you that you did not expect and you did not want, then you start reacting in a bad way most of the time. When you accept reality for what it is, and when you drop all expectation of a future reality, then you get a different mindset. You start acting differently because you don't really have any expectation of good or bad. You just operate within the present moment. You live in the now. So you see things as they are right now, and based on that information, you act accordingly. So I hope that helps a little bit. Obviously, you can go ahead and read a little more about that in the Stoic books that I will mention a little later, in Stoic authors as well. So the second postulate, as I mentioned, would be to take care of the things that are within your control and not to bother about the things that are outside of your control. Again, this sounds quite easy, but once again, I'll say that the most genius things are usually the simple ones that people don't even see, right? The things that are on the surface, but people just miss them completely. And I think that's exactly what you have to do, is to take care of the things that you can have under your control, that are within your reach to control. So what do I mean by that? Well, from my personal experience, let me state that, let's say, when I started getting into these various rabbit holes and started learning all kinds of truths about how the world operates, how everything is pretty much a scam, everything is upside down. Naturally, being a young guy, maybe it was 10 years ago, so I was in my mid 20s. Not very experienced, not very mature emotionally and probably cognitively either. Um, I used to take all this, and all this information created lots of emotion in me, right? And you in this state you tend to become a bit more of hot-headed. You want a revolution right now, right? Oh, we have to get rid of all these guys. These bad guys are just completely, screwing us over every single day. It's been happening for centuries. Now they all have to go. We have to rise a rebellion right now. Things like that, and and that's completely normal because you, like I said, you're still young, probably full of hormones still, not completely mature. It takes time to get some wisdom and to mature enough, and with that you start imagining things that you could do that are actually outside of your control. So it is probably good, although not for everybody, but it's still good to learn how things work, right? How things work, how they are. Um, it's good to understand how the world and by whom it is run. And speaking of all these sick people who are psychopaths, the elite psychopaths, and all that stuff. Yes, it's completely maddening what's happening there, and that it's been happening for so long, and they are not behind bars. Obviously, they are still there, and they will likely be there for quite some time as well. And it is natural that you feel so angry that you just want to go berserk on them and have a revolutionary spirit. But at the same time, you have to realize that most likely, if they have been there for so long and they are still there, it is because they are extremely powerful and they have all the resources in the world to fight anybody, pretty much anybody, and that includes you. And that means that most likely what you're thinking and fantasizing about is outside of your control. This is something. It's like it's like going to a fight with a knife against a whole army that has a nuclear arsenal at their disposal. You're literally a nobody there in this fight. And I'm not saying that such a thing is impossible. Obviously, the world probably has seen a couple of highly influential people, even messiahs, who would probably gather the world around them. But again, it's highly unlikely that you will be able to uh, uh, even create a movement or move 7.5 billion people to change 7.5 billion people's hearts in order for them to just wake up and um, get rid of these sick elites, so-called elites. So I think this is something that is outside of your control. And that is precisely, if you are getting a little more mature, you start realizing that that is something that you have to stop thinking about. And those are things that are not out of not within your control, and you have to start thinking about the things that you can actually control. And what do I mean by the things that you can control? Well, obviously, that starts from you, from your individual, from your person. That starts from your own life. And as Jordan Peterson famously says, clean up your room. This is where you have to start. This is completely within your control. You can improve and change yourself. You can develop yourself. So this is the first thing that you have to start working on. And then you have to scale a little bit up, and you have to keep scaling until you hit that kind of a ceiling where your control ends, right? So for different people it's a different level. Obviously, for someone it's it pretty much ends with maybe their family, right? They can control their own person and their family, but pretty much outside of that they don't control much. Other people can have a meaningful impact within their whole community or even within their own town or a city. So that's already a more developed, more mature person, and more a person who has all kinds of capabilities that allow him to have more control over, on a larger scale. And yes, there are also people who are so extremely good and at something, like business or even politics or even spiritual teachings, that they it is within their control to have an effect on quite a large subset of a population. They can affect, you know, 1 million people or 2 million people. So these people exist too, and that's within that is the framework, that is the levels of control that they have to work with. But they shouldn't really go outside of that, right? Because if you feel like you've hit that ceiling, that's it. That's the borders within which you have to work. So that is what I mean by saying that you have to take care of the things within your control and not to bother about the stuff outside of your control. Once you start doing that, you will notice how your life actually becomes a lot more meaningful, and you don't really waste time anymore about on thinking about all these external things that exist in the world but don't necessarily come into direct contact with you. Obviously, some of the things that the parasites do will affect you personally and individually, but then in that moment you will evaluate the situation and you will do whatever it is necessary, whatever is within your control to do about that, right? So right now, let me give you a simple example. Right now, if you know that there's someone out there who is I don't know, building space weapons who can, evaporate a whole city. You can't really do much about it. You just need to stop thinking about it, because it's completely outside of your control. It's you're not, unless you work in the military intelligence and you're that one of those awakened guys who want to, subvert these operations. Just forget about it and stop thinking about it. It's because it can be really addictive to go into these rabbit holes, conspiracy rabbit holes, right? And I'm similar. I like those too. But what you can do is, take care of your family, take care of your neighborhood. Maybe explain to them, hey, these things are happening. Someone's building these, direct energy weapons or whatever they are in space, and they can destroy us at any time. So enjoy your day while it lasts, basically, because that thing is outside of your control. So that's the main premise here. Let me recap. First, accept what is, accept the present moment, accept what is the state of affairs right now. And second, take care of the things that are within your control, and don't bother about the stuff outside of your control. So this is what Stoicism is about. This is what it is to me. There are many examples in life, but I think from popular culture, I guess a really good example would be, I don't know if you've read the book or watched the movie called The Shawshank Redemption, where the main character got in prison and spent quite a few years in prison, but obviously, at first he was quite upset being in prison, like everybody would, but then he took over his feelings, and he accepted, first of all, he accepted the situation, right? He accepted, okay, now I'm in prison, probably gonna spend the rest of my life here. And secondly, he started working and doing things that were within his control, and he quickly, as you read or watch a movie, he quickly gained quite a lot of control in the prison, even within that prison, he gained quite a little bit of respect. He even got promoted to certain positions within the prison. Even got the guards on his side and things like that. So, the whole thing ended with pretty much happily for him, at least. I recommend this movie. If you don't want to read it, it's pretty good. That would be a Stoic mindset. That would be a Stoic mindset, right? That's how you do it. You accept the situation for what it is, and you work with what you have. So essentially what I'm saying is that you can be a happy slave, or you can be a happy rich man. It is quite possible to be a happy slave in terms of, I don't recommend people being slaves, obviously. I'm just saying that even if you are a slave, you can still accept the situation for what it is, and just do your best at, in that particular situation. instead of falling into depression or maybe even killing yourself because you don't accept reality completely. So if you want to study a little more about Stoicism, if you want to read some Stoics, some ancient Stoic philosophers, I highly recommend the ones that I read personally. Those are only two, although there are more. And the first one would be Marcus Aurelius, the emperor, the famous philosopher king. His meditations that he wrote for himself were discovered later. It was basically his diary, and you can see a lot of wisdom there. He discusses with himself, I guess, all kinds of things, all kinds of daily events that happen with him, and people's characters, and a very, very good read, I think. If a king can if a king needs this kind of help and self-reflection, I think anybody can do it as well, right? Obviously, a king's job is quite stressful, but still, I think anybody would be wise to take some time for self-reflection and actually see where they are in terms of their mindset, right? And the second one is the letters of Seneca. Seneca is a great Stoic philosopher as well. Again, he wrote a bunch of letters to his friend or student. They were exchanging letters, and exactly the same. I think it's great that these letters were preserved, and you can read them. You can find them for free, or you can just buy a book. Also, pretty much encapsulates the whole philosophy of the Stoics, and like I said, I just gave you a very brief example of what Stoicism is about, a brief description of it. You can definitely read more, there's more to it, but I wanted to give you something that is more of a pointer, more of a introduction to it, and even if you don't read any Stoics at all, just remembering the 2 points that I covered in this episode should be enough for you to start realizing that, things are not as bad as they are, and they will not be as bad as you think they are, because if you start adopting this strategy, if you start accepting things for what they are, and if you start paying attention more to the things that are within your control and putting the other things either completely out of your mind, or at least in the background where they are not at the forefront and bug you all the time, you will see a qualitative effect on your life. You will see an increasing quality of your life simply because your life will be rid of these stressors, the stressors that do not need to be there, to be honest. It is quite known that the poorest fishermen in some Asian, Southeast Asian village are the happiest people, right? Because they simply don't know anything. They just live their simple lives, going fishing every day, and they are super happy. Think about it and think what it means for you and for your loved ones. I think it's really important to reevaluate what kind of mindset you have, and I think Stoicism would be the one that you could adopt these days to improve your life a little bit. With that said, thanks for joining me again, and join us on Telegram. The group for discussion is called Citadelium as well. We discuss this and other topics, how to build citadels, and the current state of the world as well in that group. That said, until next time.